Star Walker Studios presents Game Master's Journey, your multi-dimensional RPG podcast. A very important aspect of our hobby that is sometimes overlooked is establishing and maintaining clear communication with your players. In every way, from setting player expectations to resolving conflicts among the people at the table, communication is key. Today, I set off again on the Obsidian Monolith to address a listener's problems with power gaming players and reflect on some insights I've gained from my own groups lately. So join me on the journey. Together, we can become game masters truly worthy of the title. Hello listener, greetings fellow GM and or player. Welcome to episode 54 of Game Master's Journey, your multi-dimensional RPG podcast. I'm your host Lex Starwalker and I'm transmitting to you today from the Obsidian Monolith somewhere outside time and space. I want to welcome you to season 4 of the show. Have a lot of really fun plans for this season of Game Master's Journey, and I'm really excited about this season. Lots of good things coming. So I've got a great show for you today. I'm going to be talking about the importance of good communication at your RPG table, whether that table is physical or virtual. So this may be obvious, but I'm going to say it just in case it's not obvious. Communication is absolutely vital for our hobby. When you think about it, the tabletop RPG experience is really nothing but communication fueled by imagination. I like that. Communication fueled by imagination. Communication is important in a multitude of ways. As a GM, it's important to be able to communicate a scene well, to describe the PC's surroundings in such a way that everyone can be on the same page. We need to be able to get the world across, to convey the setting so the players can feel at home there and understand it. And we need to convey NPC personalities and motivations so players can react to them and know what to expect from the NPCs. We also need to communicate the rules and the system of the game we're playing, including any house rules that we may have come up with. So all this is true, but I think that communication is even more important when it comes to the interactions of the players and the GM as people, both within and outside the game session. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. And it's kind of funny because I participate and observe a lot of RPG communities out there, especially on the internet, different forums, different communities for various role-playing games. And so many times I see people writing in to YouTubers or podcasters or bloggers or whoever. Maybe they're newer GMs or they just want some advice on this, that, or the other thing. And so many times the answer to the person's problem that they're asking about is simply communication. And I don't know why, so many of these questions are asked when that is simply the answer. If people don't realize that communication is the answer, or if maybe they're hoping to find some, magic bullet or magic pill that they can use to solve the problem so they don't have to communicate. Or if maybe, people just don't know how to communicate or don't know how to confront players when they have an issue. But whatever the reason is, that is the solution to so many of these problems that people are having. So this episode is actually coming about kind of as a confluence of a few different things. Part of it is a listener who wrote a fairly detailed email to me asking about how to deal with some power gamers at his table, and pretty much boiled down to a combination of communication and respect, which I've talked about on the show as well. Also some experiences that I've had recently with my groups involving in communication that were kind of eye-opening for me. And also, like I said, I just see it coming up so often in all these communities that I'm a part of. So it seems like a great umbrella topic, communication that can cover a lot of things. And I don't expect to completely address this in one episode of the show, but I'm going to cover as much as I can. Now, of course, I am always open to hearing from you, any thoughts or opinions or ideas that you might have. So you can email me at gamemastersjourney@gmail.com if during this discussion you have anything that you'd like to add. This is such a huge topic that I'm sure, I'll be returning to it in some way, shape, or form in the future. So I thought the first thing that we could talk about today is session 0, which is the perfect and ideal time to get the communication going between you and your players. And I've talked on, I think, numerous episodes of this show and GM Intrusions about session 0 and how important it is to have a session 0. In fact, I always have session 0s now for any game that I run. I can't imagine having a game without a session 0, unless maybe, you're talking about just a one shot. So session 0 is your chance as a GM to calibrate your players' expectations for the game, right? And there may be more or less of this involved depending on your specific situation, but you want to let the players know, what game we're playing, what kind of game this is, and what I as a GM am wanting to do. What kind of a story am I wanting to tell? What kind of a campaign am I wanting to run? What kind of characters would be appropriate for this campaign? What kind of characters would not be appropriate for this campaign? And the more that you can do this and the more you can communicate to your players in session 0 as far as what you're wanting to do and what will work and what won't work, the less problems you will have going forward. Because if you're playing, I don't know, D&D, let's just use D&D for an example. If you're going to run a D&D campaign and you just tell your players to just make characters and you don't give them anything to go on, the chances of them making a character that's going to fit what you're planning, unless you're just not planning anything, are pretty small. Because, well, for one thing, there are numerous D&D campaign worlds out there. So it matters if we're playing on Kryn or we're playing in Forgotten Realms or we're playing in the GM's homebrew world. I mean, that matters as far as, maybe what classes are available or what alignments are available or what character options are available or what equipment is available. Maybe you're going to run a futuristic D&D campaign where there's lasers and stuff, So those are things that the players need to know to have any hope of making a character that's going to fit, right? And this, session 0 is a chance for you all to come together as a group and decide and be clear on exactly what kind of campaign you're going to be playing, what kind of story you want to tell, and the characters again. This is also a perfect time to inform the players of any house rules you're going to be using or any changes to the game's mechanics that they need to know about. And, it's a perfect time to let them know what you expect from them as far as the characters they create and things like the mood and tone that you're going for with the campaign, right? Are you wanting to run a horror adventure where, it's going to be very tense and scary? If you're running a horror thing, then obviously people cutting jokes at the table isn't something you want, right? Every time someone makes everyone at the table laugh, they've just destroyed whatever mood that you've built up to that point in the session, right? Is your campaign going to be serious business? Are you one of those GMs where you want the players when they walk in the door to be in character at all time? You don't want side conversations out of character about the movie everybody watched last night or whatever. These kinds of things are things to tell your players in session 0. Or maybe you just want a laid back campaign and you're fine if there's comedy, you're fine if the character concepts are a little goofy. These are things that you can communicate in session 0. Because again, if you're thinking as a GM, I'm going to run this really gritty horror campaign, and the players don't know this, and you've got a player coming with like their slapstick, goofy character, obviously there's going to be a disconnect, and you're going to have problems with that character that are they're just going to keep going. The problems are never going to go away because you have a conflict between the character and what the GM is wanting to do with the campaign. So it's definitely the easiest just to avoid all this stuff altogether and set expectations from the very beginning. And again, it's not just about the players making appropriate characters, but you also want them to know what they're getting into, so that they can be prepared mentally for whatever you're going to throw at them. If I'm going to be playing a gritty horror campaign, I want to know that as a player going in, not just in thinking about my character, but just so that I know what to expect when I get to the session and I know how to behave. If I know the DM is wanting to do this really, serious horror thing and really is trying to get a very specific emotional feel to the game, then I'll try not to make so many jokes, right? And also, session 0 is a great time for the players to let the GM know what they expect or what they're looking for. I think ideally there's kind of a meeting in the middle here. It's not just necessarily the GM coming to the table and say, okay, guys, this is what we're doing. This is what I want. Make something that fits. Although, you can totally do that. That's a very old school way of running a game. And depending on what you're wanting to run, that may be appropriate. There's nothing wrong with that. I've run campaigns where I had a very specific kind of story I wanted to tell, and I had a lot of parameters and guidelines for the players making characters and things like that, so that every character could fit. Like, for instance, I think I've mentioned on the show before, my longest running campaign of anything I ever ran was a D&D campaign set in the Forgotten Realms. It was in the 3rd edition days, where each of the player characters was a chosen of a deity. Okay, so my whole idea for the campaign was there's all this crazy stuff going on with the gods of the world, and the gods are each tapping these chosen mortals down in the world to kind of further their own agendas. And the idea for the campaign was that the group of player characters coming together would be a group of chosen who represented gods who had aligned interests and were working towards a common goal, right? So I had a lot to tell the players as far as what kind of characters to make so that they would fit in the story. I was like, okay, your character has to be a follower of a deity. It has to be a good aligned deity. You don't have to be a cleric or a paladin or anything like that, but you need to be a believer. You need to be, one of the people that actually are involved with the religion and not just, paying lip service to it. Like, you need to be a true believer. You need to really, your character needs to have the same ideals that the god does, right? And then you're all going to be a chosen of this deity. So you're going to have, specific powers and abilities because of that. So, you might want to think about that when you design your character and make sure that, having some magical abilities fits with the concept of your character, or at least that you're aware if there is a conflict. Like, maybe someone's going to make some kind of barbarian that's afraid of magic, and it's like, that could actually be really cool, but just know that you're going to have magical powers, and it's something that you're going to have to deal with as that character. You don't want to be blindsided by that, right? So, it's cool as a GM if that's what you're doing, but it's also cool to kind of come to the table with a few general ideas and let the players kind of help you fill in the blanks. And, this is nice because it allows you to more kind of tailor the campaign to what the players are going to enjoy, right? Maybe you're thinking, oh, it might be fun to do a horror thing. And then you get together for session 0 and you learn that none of the players are at all keen on the idea of playing horror, and they'd rather play something where they can have fun and goof off, right? And as a GM, I'm interested in what the players want, because if they're having fun, I'll be having more fun. Now, that said, I'm not going to completely run something I have no interest in because that's what the players want. Because, again, I have to enjoy what I'm doing too. And, if I'm not into what I'm doing, then I'm not going to do a very good job at it. So ideally in session 0, everybody comes to a consensus as far as what we're doing, and everybody's on the same page, and everybody's excited about the campaign and excited to make their character, and they're happy with it. But the other side of this is okay, let's say you're the GM wanting to do the horror campaign, and you're like, I want to do a horror campaign. This is what I'm doing, guys. Well, you may have a player that's just like, I'm sorry, I'm not into that. And so that player can walk away. He can walk away before he wasted an hour making the character. He can walk away before he wasted multiple game sessions trying to play in a campaign and then finding out it's horror and he's not going to like it, right? And then you have time as a GM to find someone to replace that player if you need to. So I just think session 0s are really important, and it's really important to have everyone on the same page from square one. You can also, during session 0, communicate any outside of game concerns that you need to cover. Things like your expectations as a GM regarding things like punctuality and attendance. How late is too late? How much notice should the players give you if they're going to be late or if they're not going to make it? How are you going to handle player absences? If a player's not there, what happens with their character? Is another player going to play their character? Are you going to play their character? Is their character just going to fade in the background? Are you and the player going to finagle some explanation for why the character isn't there? Is the character going to get XP when the player isn't there? These are all things that you can set forth in session 0. So again, everybody knows what's going on. You can also let players know where you stand on metagaming discussion at the table. If it really bothers you when in the middle of a combat, players are having more discussion about what to do than their characters actually could in the heat of the moment, then this is the time to let them know and be like, hey, I don't want metagame talk at the table. And if you do it, I'm not going to be happy. And there might be penalties like XP penalties or whatever. Any host or house rules that there might be, like, hey, everybody needs to use a coaster for your drink because this is our nice wood dining room table and I don't want you screwing it up. Or, hey, guys, I want you to roll dice on a book and not on the hard table because I hate that sound. Or, hey, guys, there's no smoking. Stuff like that. Who's going to bring snacks? Things like that. Like, these are all things that you can hash out in session 0 so that when you show up for session 1, you can just jump into the game and have your guns ablazing and you don't have to waste time with all this crap. Session 0, it's not a waste of time. Session 1, I feel like it's a waste of time to have to talk about this stuff. So good communication is going to solve a lot of problems among the players. And by among the players, I also mean the GM. And it can also avoid a lot of problems before they even happen. And again, like I mentioned earlier, I see a lot of requests for help and guidance in various online communities from GMs, asking questions about everything from how to hand out magic items to how to handle a PC death. And in the vast majority of these cases, the answer that's given boils down to have an adult conversation with your players. In fact, I'll argue right now that any issue at your table, any interpersonal issue at your table can be and will be solved with this advice. So, next time you're in your game and an issue comes up, before you go to a forum or before you go to Google Plus and ask someone for help, see if you can find the answer together with the other people at your table, because that's where the problem is and that's where the solution is too. Now, I've more than once in my life worked as a manager in various places, and I've found that many of the skills I learned as a manager apply directly to running a role-playing game as a game master. Part of the GM's job is to be a manager of the people at the table, and you need to know how to handle conflict and you need to know how to confront people without being confrontational. Now, my best piece of advice I can give for dealing with people is simply don't be an asshole. And that sounds cheeky, but it's really true, and it's really that simple. I have a firm belief that you can say pretty much anything to any person and have them be receptive to that thing that you just said, even if you just said something that they would normally not be receptive to. The trick is all in how you deliver the message. You have to find the right approach that will work with that specific person. Now, that might seem a little like, oh, how am I going to know what works with each person? And, I have to really know these people. And what if I'm playing with someone at a con and I don't know them? Or what if I'm playing with someone online and I don't know them? Or maybe I'm playing with someone around the table, but I haven't known them that long, or I don't know them well enough to know, how to talk to them about their power gamey min-maxy character and how it's not going to work and they need to change some things. Like, I don't know how to approach this person. So don't worry, you don't have to be an interpersonal genius to be a GM, although it probably helps. Luckily, there is a single approach that will work with most people. And if the approach doesn't work, most likely you're dealing with someone unreasonable that you really don't want at your table anyway. And that approach is simply to speak to the person as a fellow adult with respect, be firm, be clear, be concise, and listen to what they have to say. Be willing and open to changing your mind. But at the end of the day, don't be afraid to be firm and be like, sorry, this is the way it is, because you're the game master. So as I mentioned before, I recently received an email from a listener, Nathaniel Starr, who asked for my advice on how to deal with some players he's been having problems with. And just as a quick aside, I asked Nathaniel if it was okay if I outed him on the show and gave his name, because I was concerned that his players might hear this and know that we're talking about them and be offended. And he was like, don't worry about it. I've asked my players numerous times to listen to your show and they refuse to. And I just want to mention that because you're going to see a recurring theme in Nathaniel's discussion with me here about these players, and this is just fits right in that theme of the kind of people it seems like we're dealing with. But I don't know Nathaniel, I don't know his players, so I don't want to make too many assumptions, and we can all come to our own conclusions. So I'm going to share parts of his email with you. We went back and forth a bit, and there's a lot more to it. I'm not going to go into a lot of the specifics, but this is a great kind of way, I think, to get at this whole communication thing by taking an example of someone who's having some problems and looking at how communication can be used to solve those problems. So Nathaniel says, I really enjoyed your episodes about what makes good players. The players do need to realize that they make up part of the game, and some of the responsibility of the fun is on them, not just the GM. But what about min-maxers and power gamers? I've been recently having trouble with some players in my tabletop role-playing group. The problem is that they are out to win the game. They have taken to min-maxing like crazy and not thinking of their characters as more than the numbers on the page. I have a love-hate relationship with the World of Darkness. I mean the classic World of Darkness using the storyteller system. As you know, you get points or dots to put into your character as you wish, and it is quite easy to min-max in that system. So while I want to let my players have freedom to make their characters within the rules, I find them doing things like making all caitiffs, which are clanless vampires that don't have the clan weaknesses, giving them free reign on choice of disciplines, which are like the vampires' supernatural powers. Okay, so we're getting into specific things here, but basically they're gaming the system to make a min-max character, because the way Vampire the Masquerade works is you have various clans, different types of vampires, and each type of vampire has certain powers that they're especially good at, and those powers are cheaper and easier to get with XP than non-clan powers. So these clanless vampires have equal access to all the powers, and they pay a little bit more than a clan vampire would for their clan power, but not as much as they would for a non-clan power. So, in Vampire the Masquerade, if you're looking to make a min-max character, caitiff is a good way to go. And honestly, I've run a lot of Vampire, and as soon as someone says that they want to make a caitiff, I mean, that's a red flag right there, right? I'm immediately like, why do you want to make a caitiff, right? Because I know that that's the min-maxer's choice. And if they start giving me this awesome story about, this clanless vampire and how they came to be and all that stuff, then I'm a little more on board with it, right? But if they're like, well, then I can get any disciplines I want, then I'm like, that's not a good reason to make a character for this game that I'm running right now. And again, session 0 would have established what I'm looking for. Okay, so getting back to what Nathaniel says, I believe this game requires you to hold yourself back and think of the character concept and wants you to disregard that power gaming desire, though the book doesn't explicitly say that. And actually, the book doesn't explicitly say don't power game, but it does very explicitly say numerous times through the character creation process that, you should be working from a character concept. That first you should have your character concept that is completely free of any rules and mechanics, and you should be building a character that fits that and making choices that fit that instead of, just picking the things that you think would be good to have. So I do think it is pretty explicit in the book, actually. I mean, the storyteller system is the storyteller system. It's not the dice rolling system or min-max system or the epic power gaming system, right? So right here in what Nathaniel said, and I'm going to read what he said again one more time. I believe this game requires you to hold yourself back and think of the character concept, and the game wants you to disregard the power gaming desire. And, I'm saying that is pretty explicit in the book, but that's his belief, right? That's something to communicate in session 0. That right there, that he believes this is what the game requires of you. Now, it seems like this isn't clear to the players right now, right? Because they're violating that. They're making these power game characters, and he goes into more detail later about what exactly they're doing. But they're doing things like taking backgrounds at 5, like taking resources at 5, which lets you have a crazy amount of money so they can buy all this like paramilitary gear and all this. I mean, it's just ridiculous, the stuff these people are doing. So it seems like either A, the players aren't clued in to what Nathaniel is wanting to do, and they're just ignorant of what he's trying to do and going outside of that without realizing it, or B, they just don't give a fuck. In which case, I would say just find new players. Why do you want to play with people that don't care about you as a GM and what you want to get out of the game, and all they care about is themselves? Why would you want to play with those people? So I would, of course, give them the benefit of the doubt and assume that the fault lies with myself, and I have failed to communicate to these people what I want, and I would do so now. And I would communicate very clearly now what I want and what they're doing that isn't working and why it's not working and what needs to be done to fix it. So Nathaniel goes on. One character made himself a mercenary concept, wrote up a background that was basically him as Arnold Schwarzenegger in Predator, if the Predator was a vampire that instead of self-destructing, made him into a vampire. Okay. And then he talks about some mechanics things, like he gave himself a 1 strength, which is really low, almost as low, well, that's as low as it can be. 5 dexterity, which is as high as dex can be, at least starting out, and 4 stamina, since he was planning to use firearms all the time. This obviously makes no sense and is not true to the character. So yeah, if you're picturing your guy as like Arnold Schwarzenegger in Terminator, giving him a 1 strength does not fit the concept, right? I mean, yeah, if you're like, well, I'm always going to use guns, so I need to max out this dexterity, I don't need strength. That's min-maxing. That's mechanical stuff, but it's not fitting your concept. So you either need to make a character that fits your concept, or I guess you could make a concept that fits this power gaming character you want to make. And I've seen players do that, which is why I said when, if a player told me they wanted to play a caitiff and I asked why, and they gave me this involved backstory that was really good, I said that would open me up to it a bit. I didn't say that I would let them play a caitiff at that point, because I've seen power gamers who can bullshit with the best of them and will come up with very good story reasons for why they made this mid-max optimized character. And, you know, I'm not afraid to call bullshit when that happens. It's like Jon Stewart said, if it smells like bullshit, it's probably bullshit. So this makes no sense, having a character with one strength, but describing them as Arnold Schwarzenegger. And yeah, you have two choices. You either make the character fit the concept, you know, as far as the stats, or you make the concept fit the stats. And Vampire is very clear that you start with a concept and go from there. So the one strength is not going to fly. And then he says, when I pointed this out to the player was annoyed with me. So there's red flag right there. You've got a problem player here, I think. Either that or maybe Nathaniel just didn't handle that well. But even if he didn't, I don't think the player really has a cause to be annoyed because he's being asked to play by the rules. And then he says, you know, like I mentioned with the backgrounds, they're taking Resources 5, which gives them insane amounts of money. They're taking Generation 5, which makes their character very powerful to start with, and Retainers 5. I'm wondering where they're getting all this XP to have all this, you know, have all these backgrounds at 5. I'm wondering, Nathaniel, are you not using the standard character building? Because I will say, you know, if you're starting out and giving them more points to start with than the book says, you're kind of telling them that you're running a power gaming thing. Especially if you don't explicitly say, hey, I'm giving you more points than you would normally have, but this is the reason why, and this is what I would like you to use those points for, right? Because with no explanation, just saying, yeah, we're going to make beginning characters, but I'm giving you all these extra points, to me says we're power gaming here. It's like, I've literally had DMs say, okay, we're making characters, and instead of rolling, everybody gets 18s and everything. You know, it's like, okay, at that point, I don't even want to play the game, right? I'm like, I'm out. I'm not into this. So yeah, that definitely sends a message if that's what's happening. He says also, before realizing how much they were min-maxing, I made the mistake of letting them make their retainers characters since I didn't want to. So they had an army of combat ghouls whom they actually tried to give the retainer background to. Of course, I had to say retainers can't have retainers, to which they were also annoyed. So again, this is a problem. They are being annoyed that you're enforcing the rules as they are in the book. I'm starting to think maybe this isn't a great example for the show, because it really seems like the problem isn't with communication between Nathaniel and the player. The problem seems to just be the players, and they're just dicks. So yeah, if your players are annoyed by you setting limits, especially if those are the limits in the book and you're not even, you know, restricting things further than they are in the book, then you might seriously consider finding new players, because I think the problem might be with the players. So I hope that's not true. I hope this is something we can fix and Nathaniel doesn't just need to find new players, although finding new players is not hard. He also says they wanted to use the 5 resources to have body armor and things like flamethrowers. They were even talking about tanks and helicopters, which within the description of the background would be possible. Now, I know I could give them the game they wanted and fight fire with fire. Yes, you could do that. It may even be fun that way for a session or two. Yeah, it might be. Probably not, but it might be. But it's not what I intend. In my opinion, it's not what the game is about, though I'm sure some enjoy this type of game. I've done similar things in games like Mutants and Masterminds and in D&D to a certain extent, but it's not that interesting to me. So again, these are all really great things to communicate to the players in session 0. Or now, you know, if you haven't communicated it to them now and you're already playing, then do it now. Give them the benefit of the doubt. Assume they're not just being assholes and that they just don't understand where you stand on this or how important it is to you. You know, maybe you did communicate it, but maybe they just don't think it's a big deal. You know, maybe you haven't communicated that this is really important, guys. Like, this is what the game is about to me. Okay. And yes, this should have been covered in session 0, but sometimes as a GM, you may think that something is really obvious to the players and you only find out later that it isn't. Like, for instance, the fact that your retainers can't themselves have retainers because they're not player characters. That seems really fucking obvious, but obviously it's not obvious to everyone. So at that point you'd be like, hey, wait, hold on, guys. No, you can't do that, which he did. So get everybody together and explain all of this to them. All of this stuff you explained to me about what the game means to you and what you want from the game and what kind of things, explain it to them. And I would be very specific. I would say, this is what would be appropriate for one of your characters. Give them some examples, maybe make a couple characters or just, abstractly just say, this is the kind of thing it would be appropriate to do with your character. This is the kind of thing it wouldn't be. Like taking generation, retainers, and resources at 5. That's just not appropriate. So I would get them together. I would explain everything. And then I would have them make new characters. And with these particular players, they're already fighting you about things that are in the book. They're already doing everything they can to abuse the system. So I would set very clear limits. I would not allow resources 5. I would sit down with the backgrounds. I would look at every single background and ask yourself, what level of this background am I comfortable with the players taking, assuming they're going to take the maximum that you let them. And set limits. Say, okay, resources, you can have up to 3, but that's as high of resources as I'll allow during character creation. Generation, you can only take 1 or 2 points in generation. That's all I'm allowing for this campaign. And set limits for all of those backgrounds, especially, the ones that are going to be problems like generation, resources, retainers, things like that. And again, normally I would give the players the benefit of the doubt and I would just say, hey, this is the kind of thing I'm looking for. Let's, either make new characters or let's, revise these characters to fit that. And I would give them the chance to do it themselves before I went and, set all these limits and basically gave them a laundry list of do's and don'ts. But with Nathaniel's players, I would do the laundry list because that's what it's going to take with these guys. So Nathaniel says, how do you handle the power gaming min-maxing aspect of these games? It's difficult because these are actual long-time real friends, and I should point out that it's not the whole group that's like this. Some players are role-playing oriented. And he says, I think the essence is that the World of Darkness is a much more loose game system, and as a result, there is an unwritten and often unspoken suggestion to make a character to role-play, not a character to role-play. With 2 L's. And again, it is very explicitly said throughout the entire book, all of the old World of Darkness books, that's what you're supposed to be doing. But it is difficult when the rules don't restrict things. It is difficult to tell players no, and if you do, they can have resentment. Well, you know what? If they have resentments, fuck them. Seriously, how petty is it to resent your friend? Supposedly these are your friends. To resent your friend because he is setting some limits on this game that he is running for you, that he's putting all this time and effort in, that he's not coming in and saying, hey guys, you can do whatever the hell you want and completely fuck up this thing I've tried to build for you. That's cool. How can I resent someone for saying, hey guys, I want you to make characters and here are some guidelines and some restrictions so that you have a character that really fits into the story I want to tell? Anybody that would resent that, I don't want at my table. I don't even want them in my house. That would go beyond gaming for me. I'm like, you're just a dick at that point. And yeah, this, if these people that Nathaniel's talking about are really lifelong friends, like he says, if they're really your friends, then you can discuss this with them and they'll be cool with it. I don't think the issue is with the game or the system at all. I think you'd be having the same issue with any game you played. The issue here is with the people involved. So if they're really your friends, you should be able to sit down with them, explain how this isn't what you want, explain what you do want, and then hit the reset button on the campaign, and they should be fine with that. If they're not fine with that, then consider whether or not they're really your friends, or if maybe you're being taken advantage of. There are plenty of fish in the sea, and that has never been more true than when referring to RPG players. There are many more players than GMs. If you are willing to GM, you've already overcome the biggest hurdle to finding people to game with. So don't feel like you have to put up with this. Even if you decide they are your friends, but they won't budge on this, you still don't have to put up with this. You guys can go to movies together or whatever, but find other people to roleplay with. So Nathaniel says, it's an interesting topic to discuss the responsibility to not abuse the system and what is abusing the system. then how does a GM navigate the difficult waters of hoping players do the right thing and how to carefully step in? So right here, how does a GM navigate the difficult waters of hoping players do the right thing? I don't think you should ever hope the players do the right thing. For one thing, the right thing isn't a concrete thing, right? It's a matter of personal opinion and perspective. There is no one right thing. So you have to tell the players what you want and what you expect. Then they can choose to play by your rules or not to play. It's really that simple. The important thing is to let them know in the very beginning, or as soon as you can, what you expect, so they can make that decision of, am I on board with this or am I not? Should I stay or should I go, right? So yeah, I think all of this can be solved with communication, just having a heart-to-heart adult conversation with these people, telling them what's going on, why you're unhappy, what's making you unhappy, what can be done to set things right. And if they respect you and they value you as a person and as a GM, then that's all you need to do. And if that doesn't work, then by all means, find new players. Don't let people take advantage of you like that. All right, so that leads me into my next topic within this topic, which is communication and respect, right? And I know this episode has been all about communication, but another very important thing that goes hand in hand with communication is respect. Everyone at the table should respect one another. For one person to put their own enjoyment of the game ahead of everyone else's shows a lack of respect and should not be tolerated. Personally, I won't play with people who don't respect me. Nathaniel's players here are showing a massive lack of respect unless they're completely, truly clueless to what's going on, which I find kind of hard to believe, but could be. We'll see when he has a talk with them. They'll either come around to be like, oh man, I'm so sorry. I had no idea how much I was screwing this up. And, everything will be better, or it won't. If I were Nathaniel, I'd have a discussion with the whole group at the same time. I'd lay down my expectations and very clearly explain what the players are doing that is not working specifically. I would then give them the chance to make new characters or fix the old ones. And I would say, this is the game I'm running. If you want to play the game as I've described it, then I would love to have you in the game. If you're not willing to play within these guidelines that I've set forward, then this just isn't the game for you, my friend. Maybe next time I run a game, I'll call you, but probably not. Don't play with people who don't respect you. It's not fun. You'll end up loathing the campaign and it will fizzle out. Save everyone's time, especially yours, and only play with people who respect one another and are willing to play within the parameters set forth by the GM. So finally, to wrap this up, I just wanted to talk a little bit about an experience I recently had with my D&D group. As you probably know, we've been playing Tyranny of Dragons, which is the first published campaign for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. We started playing in January. We play every week for usually 4 hours or more. And we missed a few weeks when I moved, and since I've been here in Seattle, we've missed some weeks here and there. But for the most part, since January, we've played every week through this campaign. We got through the first book, the first half of the campaign. We're into the second book, and I just found myself losing steam on the campaign. And I'm going to do an episode about this, I think, about kind of my revelations about me personally and, what we call adventure paths or published campaigns, and why I'm probably not going to run them anymore. But that's a topic for another day. But I just was losing steam and interest in the campaign. I was getting bored with it. And it's a really terrible place to be as a GM when you have this great group of people. You get together every week, you game, you have a good time, you've got a good thing going, you've been going for months, and to realize as a GM that the story just isn't doing it for you anymore. You're not digging this campaign, you're bored, right? It's same old, same old. Now, when you're running your own thing, it's really easy to just change direction and do something totally different, which is usually what I do. And then everything's great, right? But, one of the problems with a long published campaign is it's more difficult to do that, especially if you want to actually finish this campaign that you spent your hard-earned money for, right? If you're willing to just throw the campaign out the window and be like, well, whatever happens, then awesome. But, if you're like, I spent $50 for this book and I'd kind of like to use it, then your options are pretty limited. So that's a bad place to be in, because it's like, I don't want the group to fall apart. I don't want to not have this gaming group anymore. But at the same time, I know that when I am not engaged by the campaign, that it's not going to be as fun for the players, because I'm not going to be as into it. It's going to be harder for me to take time to do the prep and be ready. And it's just going to be lackluster. And even if I, tough it out and run the thing every week, no matter what, even though I'm hating it, it's probably going to fizzle anyway, because people are going to lose interest because I'm not feeling it, right? So I was kind of like debating, I'm like, what to do. And it occurred to me, if we just, like, I love the players, I don't have a problem with the players, and I don't have a problem with D&D 5th edition. If we just did something different, I'd be happy. I don't want to do Tyranny of Dragons anymore, at least not for a while. So I'm kind of wrestling with this. And one of my players, Steve, who is awesome, shout out to Steve. I'm not sure if he listens to the show or not, but Steve's awesome. Steve made a post on our forum and was kind of like, hey guys, I've noticed that this campaign kind of seems like it's losing steam. We've had, quite a few weeks where we ended up not playing for various reasons. And I've just, to me, this is like a warning sign that I've noticed in groups in the past, where when this starts happening, a lot of times the campaign fizzles and dies. And he was like, I really like gaming with you guys, and I really don't want to see that happen. And, if we're losing interest in the campaign, I'd be fine with doing something else as opposed to, things just fizzling out. And I saw that and I'm like, oh my God, this is what I should have done like 3 weeks ago, right? So, this started a conversation, and come to find out, not only was I not the only one losing interest in the campaign, everyone was losing interest in the campaign, and just no one wanted to say anything. And I get it, as a player, if you're just not feeling a campaign anymore and you're not really having fun anymore, it's hard to go to the GM and be like, hey dude, I'm really not having fun in your game anymore. Is there something we can do about this? Because it's kind of starting to suck. Right? Like how, again, there's a way to say it that would work, right? But it's hard to find that way to say that, without hurting that person's feelings, and you're not sure, right, how to say it without hurting their feelings. So I get it, right? So like everybody's kind of like not wanting to say anything, but we're all kind of feeling the same thing. And, we all started talking about it, and, I was like, well, here's how I see it. Here are the options I see, which basically boiled down to, we just keep running Tyranny of Dragons, and maybe I'll just start skipping like the boring chump encounters that there are so many of, and we're going to get away from the hex crawling and the miniatures and all that bullshit, and we're just going to speed through the like story high points as fast as we can. Or we could do another D&D game, or we could play a game in another system. And then my last option was just that, we could all take our dice and go home, right? We could just stop doing this all together. And everybody said that last option of us just not doing anything, like, I don't want that. I'm cool with any of the other options, but I do not want the group to just stop gaming together, which was awesome, right? And also everybody was not super keen on continuing the campaign, which was also awesome because I didn't really want to. And so we finally decided to play Star Wars Edge of the Empire, and that's what we're going to do now. But the whole thing was just kind of an eye-opener for me, that we were all feeling the same thing, but we were all afraid to say anything. So the lesson that I've learned from this is, don't be afraid to say something, because if you're sitting at the table and you're like, man, this campaign used to be a lot of fun, but it's just lost something and it's just not fun anymore, I'd say chances are pretty good that you're not the only one feeling that way. And it may even be that everyone is feeling that way, Now, if you're the GM, it's probably a little easier to bring this up and just say, hey guys, I've noticed there seems to be a kind of a growing lack of interest in the campaign. And I have to confess myself, I'm kind of losing steam on it. How do you guys feel about this? And maybe do we want to just try something different for a while? Just put the campaign on hold. We don't have to say that we're not going to finish it, which is what we do with Tyranny of Dragons. We're saying, in the future, we may come back to it. Like, that is an option that is open, but for now we don't want to do it anymore. But even if you're a player, you could say, hey guys, at the end of the session, just say, hey, I'd like to talk with you guys real quick. I kind of feel like I'm losing steam on this game. And make it about you, right? Don't start pointing fingers like, the GM, it just sucks. And, don't do that. Take the responsibility yourself and say, hey, I am losing interest in this campaign. I'm not sure why. It could be me. Am I the only one feeling this way? Because if I am the only one feeling this way, then maybe me and the GM can get together and maybe we can come up with something different to do with my character or something that'll kind of get me excited about this campaign again, right? Maybe we can figure something out. But if others of you are feeling this way, then maybe this is something we should address as a group, right? And decide what we want to do. And I think that's a great thing to do. And I wish I would have done that, a while ago with my Tyranny of Dragons group. So yeah, and I'm really happy that Steve took the initiative. I feel a little ashamed because in a way I kind of feel like as a GM, like I should have been the one to step up and do that. But I think it's awesome that he did it. And I think, that's something too to remember, as adults playing a game together. Yes, the buck kind of stops at the GM, right? If there's an interpersonal conflict between two players, it's kind of the GM's quote unquote job to deal with that and diffuse it. It's kind of the GM's job to, make sure everybody knows when and where the session is and all this stuff. But it doesn't, like, anybody can take responsibility for that kind of thing, and everybody should at the table, right? Just because I'm not the GM doesn't mean if two players start bickering, I can't step in and say, hey guys, we're all friends here. Let's just let it lie and do something else, Or doesn't mean that I can't make sure that everybody knows when and where we're playing next, right? And usually a GM will be very appreciative of a player that will step up and take some responsibility in any way, right? So I think it's awesome that Steve did it. I think it's a great example for all of us as players of how to be proactive and take responsibility in the game and not just wait for the GM to do something about it. And I think it's also a great example to us as GMs of how, if you're not feeling it, you may not be the only one. And regardless, it's better to talk about it and get it out in the open, because even if the other players are excited about the campaign, if you're not, they may pick up on that and they may misinterpret it as maybe you're upset with them or something. They may not realize that it's because you're getting bored with the adventure, and they may think it's something else. So if you can communicate with things, people don't have to guess, people don't have to make assumptions and most likely be wrong. It can all be out there on the table. All right. Well, this episode has run long. I want to remind you about the poll, which I will link in the show notes again over on the Google Plus community, about the length of the show. Right now, the 30-minute people are winning. So far, most people want 30-minute episodes, which is fine by me and what I shoot for. But as we can see, sometimes I go way over. But this is kind of a big topic. And I think it's good stuff. And like I said at the beginning of the show, I think this is something that we will probably revisit probably more than once in the life of the show, because this is just so important. It's so huge, and it's hard, right? I mean, this isn't easy. That there's a reason that there are classes and seminars on managing people and communicating with people and all these things, because it's not easy, and it can be a delicate dance, right? Because you don't want people to get upset. You don't want people's feelings to be hurt or whatever. But at the same time, as a GM, you got to kind of step up and take charge and be the one that says, hey, let's just make sure we're all on the same page here. So definitely let me know your thoughts on this discussion and anything you'd like to add to it. And when I return to this topic, I may bring in some feedback that I get, or I may just bring it in future episodes, just here and there as we go, because I do think communication is so much a part of what we do in the RPG hobby that it's never really off topic. So you can reach me by email at gamemastersjourney@gmail.com, and you can find me on Google+, just search for Lex Starwalker, and you can find me at Twitter at Lex Starwalker. So I am on the Obsidian Monolith a lot of times, and I am traveling through time, space, dimensions, so I could be anywhere, anytime, but I have the technology to monitor the email, the Google+, the Twitter. So you send me a message there, I will get it, wherever, whenever I am. You can also visit the website, starwalkerstudios.com. There you can find the show notes for this episode and all the episodes of the show. And you can also find my other podcasts there. At the top of the show notes, you can find the Patreon button and donate buttons if you'd like to support the show. I really appreciate the patrons. Could not do this without them. You'll also find the iTunes and Stitcher buttons if you'd like to subscribe and or leave a review on one of those platforms. At the bottom of the show notes, you'll find a link to our Google Plus community. Really hope you'll join us there and cast a vote in a poll. How long do you want the shows to be? Is this episode right here too long? Probably. Also, links to my YouTube and Twitter channels, link to the 30-day trial of Audible books, courtesy of Game Master's Journey, and my Amazon referral link. Right now from Starwalker Studios this week will also be a new episode of my Star Citizens United podcast. And I am still in the process of having a giveaway for a Reliant in the game. So if you're a Star Citizen, definitely go check that out at starwalkerstudios.com/Star Citizens United. Also, a new episode of Beer Tasters, my craft and homebrew podcast that I do with my wife, Nikki, where every week we taste a couple beers and tell you all about them. And also coming out this week is the first episode of our Expanse unofficial podcast. So the Expanse is a new space opera television show coming to the Sci-Fi and Space channels. I believe it's on Space too. But definitely on the Sci-Fi channel, starting December 14th and 15th are the first two episodes based on a series of novels by James S.A. Corey. And very awesome novels. It's going to be an amazing show, and we're doing a podcast about it starting this week. So definitely tune in for that and check it out. So I hope that you have a chance to play your favorite RPG this week, and I hope that I've helped you a little bit, hopefully, to have some better communication at your table with all your players and friends. I will be back next week with another episode of Game Master's Journey. Until then, game on.
This has been a Starwalker Studios production, your source for quality gaming and hobby podcasts.
This episode's music provided by Cloudwalker, Renfield, Transboy, and Ish. Please see the show notes for more details at starwalkerstudios.com/Game Master's Journey.